Hello, hi, Jeffery Kin, Sarasota Rising Living Arts Festival, Sarasota, with Visit Sarasota's Behind the Masterpiece. And it's my honor and my pleasure and my joy. And the reason I'm here today is to talk with some of our arts aficionados from around the area. And today is no different because I get to talk with, can I call you a good friend?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to call you a good friend.
Jeffrey.
Oh my gosh, I've adored you, but I got to tell you, when we meet people, we talk to people, and how many times do you forget people's names? Has anyone ever forgotten your name?
Probably not.
Carol. So I'm talking with Carol Darling, and she is the vice president of the board of directors of Arts Advocates. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the art scene here. We're going to talk about you and your personal life and why you do the voodoo that you do so well. And we've been chatting a little bit before. I don't know if I knew that you were a fellow Ohioan. I don't think I knew that because, I'm Upper Sandusky, so I'm right. I was just a little bit
My
north of
good
you.
friend was from Upper Sandusky.
Oh, really? Look at
Yes.
us. We're gonna have to talk about them when we finish
Someday.
this. Yeah, we have to have a real conversation now, and then we'll get personal and maybe have a tea later. How's that?
That's wonderful.
Awesome, good. So, for the folks that are listening and or watching, this is just one of those times where I think part of what the festival has done for me personally is allowed me to realize that there's a plethora of arts organizations, and everyone's doing something completely different. But then everyone doesn't have the same reach or the same um, um, what do you call it? The same circle of influence, and it's great to have an organization like Arts Advocates because you used to be called the Fine Arts
Society of Sarasota.
Fine Arts Society of Sarasota. So when did that name change happen?
On 2019, we rebranded and expanded our sort of reach as to what we acquire throughout Florida artists. Before we were a little more narrow, and so 2019 we rebranded into Arts Advocates and expanded our reach a little bit.
Great. So what is Arts Advocates?
Arts Advocates has a tagline, I guess you would say,
Yeah.
of inspire, educate, and connect. And so
Inspire,
we preserve
educate.
the legacy with our historic collection of Sarasota Art Colony artists, as well as some other Florida artists. We bring awareness, like you just said, of all of the other arts organizations and what they are doing, what we are doing, how we can collaborate through exhibits and through programs. And we also provide scholarships for emerging artists in every genre.
So you all are a 501c3?
Yes, we are.
So and you take donations and you accept donations and you have sponsors and donors and
Yes.
all that.
And we are all volunteer. We have no paid staff.
Wow. So
And
you're lean and mean.
that's why I look tired.
Oh, well, you know what? There's something you have a good group of people there.
We
And
do.
because I know several folks there, and you guys
Mhm.
do great work. But I do think that you guys fly under the radar just a little bit. One of the reasons I know you, of course, is that since I live in Southgate, you have a presence right there at the Mall of Siesta Key.
Right.
And of course, when I was running the Players, we ended up getting our space there, and Catherine
Mhm.
Michelle Tanner has her space there, and Rise Above has. So we have a little arts colony there at the mall at Siesta Key.
Right.
So can you just walk somebody through? Someone's visiting. There's lots of parking, obviously, to come
Mhm.
visit you. But you have a show happening in this kind of a gallery type atmosphere. Is it every month? Does it change every month, or how does that work?
Let me start. Can I give a little history here real quick?
Do it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, John and Mabel Ringling, we can't not start a discussion of arts in Sarasota without them.
Thank you.
Almost 100 years ago, 1927, he moved the circus here. He opened the Museum of Art in 1930, and then he hired Chick Austin in 1948, who really did a connection with the community. Everybody knows Chick Austin's reputation, and whether they were born 10 years ago or 50 years ago. the Sarasota Art Colony, which I'll get to then your question about what we do at the
Sure.
gallery, in the 1930s and 1970s, a lot of artists came to Sarasota, and the founders are considered to be Helen Sawyer and Jerry Farnsworth. They are a married couple. They also had houses in the Hamptons and Cape Cod, and they had a lot of friends who were artists. They brought them to Sarasota, and I have to tell you that the Hamptons at that time in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s were not like they are right now.
Oh,
And
really?
so
What,
and
what's the
Sarah,
difference?
I heard Sid Solomon's son talk, and he said it wasn't really rural, but it was not anything like it was now.
So
And
now,
so,
when you think of it now, you do think about money.
right. And well, that's another story here about them. Apparently, they had good times up there, and
Good. Well,
so
I hope so.
they had a
Yes.
lot of friends that were artists, and so they invited them here. Sarasota became an arts destination.
Hmm.
And at one time, about 1950, 51, there were supposedly 1,500 artists here. And then we were called the Art Center of the South. And then we had artists, and most of these, I think all but one, are in the gallery at Siesta. We have Jimmy Ernst, David Budd, John Corbino, Shirley Clement, Robert Chase, who, by the way, Ringling College has a beautiful exhibit of his right now. And then Ben Stahl, which was one of the best known. He founded the first correspondence art school in the United States and did
Wow.
30 covers, illustrations of the Saturday Evening Post. And then we
Wow.
have Sid Solomon and Annie. He's an abstract artist. His work is all over the United States, probably outside of the United States. And his wife, Annie, and he was the first abstract artist that the Ringling Museum ever exhibited. So we have this background, a rich background that leads us into more like today,
Right.
but there were also art schools. After World War II, many of the soldiers that were stationed nearby at the airport, at our current airport too, um, that they came back to do through the GI Bill.
Right.
And there were supposedly 1,300 art students. And Farnworth had their school on Siesta. The Hiltons had theirs 1948. Hartman's, I believe, 1952. Sid Solomon was on Philippi Creek, and Robert Chase on Bay Road. Hartman's son still lives here. Sid Solomon's son still lives here,
Wow.
and Robert Chase's son still lives here.
Wow.
And so at that point, we became the arts capital of the Florida Gulf Coast.
Wow.
It all sort of broke up in the 1970s. And that brings us to where we are now. So if you want to ask questions, I'll answer them, or I can just keep going.
We're just going to keep talking because you're fascinating. And this is, and people don't realize that, we are made up of the energy of so many transplanted people who have lots of, we've always known that theatrically, that lots of theater people move here to
Mhm,
retire. And the
mhm.
same thing has to happen as I talk to artists from all over the country and world who live here now, is that they want to be someplace where it's sunny and it's warm and the light's good and there's galleries on every block. This is a great place to be for people in the fine arts, and you guys do a great job of representing them. Don't you guys also have part of your collection at the Van Wezel?
Yes. What we do is preserve the legacy of the Sarasota Art Colony, and we're the only ones. And I have my own concern about when some of us older folks sort of forget about the Sarasota Art Colony. Who is going to take that over? So we have a permanent collection there. It is not for sale. This is at the gallery on Siesta. It's an unparalleled collection of that era. We have expanded it to Florida artists, and 1970, 1 year after we became an organization, we purchased our first painting, and that was Hilton Leach Descending Yellows. Now we are at the gallery on Siesta. It's a beautiful, beautiful venue. We have 40 works at the gallery, and getting back to your question, we have 27 at the Van Wezel.
And
And
those are free to see, right? You can just walk.
I think there's a small fee. We don't take the registration for that. I think Van Wezel does. But Van Wezel we give a tour of the artwork, and then one of the Van Wezel docents gives the tour of backstage of uh, the orchestra pit, all of those kinds of things. So we have those paintings. Plus, a few years ago, we were donated 5 Florida Highwaymen paintings. Florida Highwaymen were 25 men, white, one woman. They were Black painters.
Mhm.
We have now 6 in the gallery because since the original 5, another one was donated to us. This was through the mid 50s through the 60s, mostly in Fort Pierce. And due to the era, the racial discrimination, they were not able to be represented by a gallery. They were not exhibited in a gallery. And so they sold their cars, their works from the trunks of cars. And apparently, somebody has calculated there were about 200,000 works that they put on Epsom board and masonite, and they used crown molding for their frames. And so there's photos of them in their backyards, painting in their garages.
Yeah, but they didn't have the money for canvases. That was the whole point, right? Is that they were painting on discarded Luan and
Whatever was reasonable and whatever they could get their hands on. And then in 2004, they were inducted into the Florida Artist Hall of Fame. 2016, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture opened with 18 of the Florida Highwaymen works.
and were
And
you guys a
so,
part of the piece that they did at the city hall? They had a hanging
right,
of was that you guys?
right. No, that was Roger Little. Roger, those were Rogers there. We did one previous to
Okay,
that
good.
on something else. And so then the programs, getting into our programs and scholarships, the last couple things, we do have the gallery. We have docent-led tours on Saturdays. We're open from 2 to 4. We have and you asked earlier about our member exhibit. In the back of the gallery, we have one of our members exhibit every month. Their work is on display for a full month, and almost every Saturday they'll do a real brief talk about their process. And then we have art talks, which are very similar to this, only they're in person. We have luncheons with outstanding speakers. Our next speaker is April 17th. We meet at the Sarasota Yacht Club, and he is, oh, I'm not sure what his title is, but he is with Oslo Rep. And so we have that one, and then we have the Van Wezel tours, which I just mentioned. And then we also have salons where we have 1 or 2 on the books right now where we visit homes of art collectors. And they're fabulous homes, fabulous collections. And so we have one coming up, which is one of our board members, and Ron Taylor. And so that one is coming up. And those are sold out. We take about 20, 22 people, and they're sold out. So, we have I think, a very robust and ambitious program considering we are all volunteers.
So I
And
have a
then,
question. So I have a question for you, just quickly to go back to this salon type thing, because if I were to invite you to my house, I would show you. Obviously, this is a piece of my art that I love,
mhm.
and it has meaning to me. It was a gift. It was So I have a whole story behind it. When you go to those folks' homes, do they have the personal connection to their art? Like a real person, or does a collector just
What
see a piece and say, "This
what
is
they
gonna"?
like what they like to say is where they got it, what fascinated them about it, what sort of possessed them to purchase it. Now, some of these have huge collections, so it's sort of hard to get through all of them, but they are beautifully displayed. They are works of true art. Most of them are artists that are probably nationally, maybe internationally known. Many would have local. Many would have local that they bought, Ringling students. I was just in a house where she must have had, I don't know, 100. And she'd say, oh, that was a Ringling student. I bought that from a Ringling. So, they have a story behind each one, and they will get to it for some.
Because my art, it means something to me. If I have a piece hanging,
I know.
I'm not a poster person. I
Hmm.
have original pieces, and that's just something that I've always appreciated. That's why I love this train of thought. I love what you all do, because I think that when I walk into someone's home and I see a blank wall, I instantly go
What could
wah
go there?
wah wah wah.
What could
Like
go there?
you're like, what the hell are you thinking? You have a great wall there for something. And with all these artists, I'm a big fan of course, of Ringling, and I have several pieces too. Where you go to one of these events, you meet the kid, you meet the artist,
Right.
they're earnest, they care, they have a viewpoint. I mean, I love that. Of course, it's always nice that things are of value, and I'm sure the Florida Highwaymen had no idea that their works 50, 60, 70 years later were going to be basically you can't buy them, right? I
Right.
mean,
Well,
basically
there
they
are some collectors who are also, quote, "retailers," and, but many of them, they probably start about 5,000, but they go up. There's a collector happens to be here in town, and, I was told that he only collects, Highwayman paintings that are 50,000 and above, and so he came to the
well,
exhibit.
well, well.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so, these people are sort of under the radar, but they're here. And so, and then I did want to mention our scholarships. We are so proud of our scholarship program. We give 50,000 or 55,000 to aspiring artists, emerging artists every year for undergraduate degrees. Last year we gave 11 at $5,000 each, and we support them through the years. It's not just a one time. So if they come in as like a sophomore, we'll support them a couple more years. We do all genres of art. We do the visual and performing arts. We do painting, illustration, sculpture, music, dance, theater, photography, digital art, you name it. And the only criteria is that they have to do an application process where they have to submit exhibits, have to submit, sound bites, whatever, to go to a U.S. college or university. And the video of last year's presentation is on our website, artsadvocates.org. And
Artsadvocates.org.
you will be so impressed with these young people. Just
So
so
is do you have just one story? Because having dealt with theater kids and the players all these years, I have a plethora of success stories of an individual story about how our organization made a difference in someone's life. Do you have one of those that
we
bubbles to
have
the
a
top?
gentleman that's probably, I would guess, early 30s, maybe 35 now. We supported him for 3 years after he came out of the military. He's just a wonderful guy, has a couple children, but we have continued to support him, and he comes a lot to the gallery. He comes and gives talks. For the last 3 years, he has come to accept his scholarship at the luncheon that we have in May. And so there's many more. Some are much younger.
Yeah.
They're 19, 20 years old, and yet we have supported some who have decided to go back into art as a career, and later, not later, but probably in their late 20s, early 30s. So
Wow.
we have the one just wonderful graduates that are still in the area. We have a thing on our newsletter, which also is on our artsadvocates.org. Um, and it's called Where Are They Now? And when you read those and you have supported them, it's just heartwarming.
It's incredible to know that you've made a difference in someone's life, and I
Mhm.
guess over time they come back. That comes back. That's all that good circles right back to you.
It
It is.
absolutely
I
does.
am such a firm believer in that. And then I was just talking to a young gentleman just now, just before this podcast, and he's talking about, oh yeah, well I'm doing this and this and this, but I have someone that's working with me because when I leave, I want them to be able to take my place and do. And he's like 20 years old, and I'm like, I can't believe you're thinking this way. You're
Mhm.
thinking like a 50-year-old would be. But he was so conscientious, and it makes such a difference. So, youth, the young Carol Darling, when and why did she fall in love with the visual arts? How did that happen? I know you're from Cincinnati, and I know that has to have a little bit of
It does.
a
It
ding
does.
ding ding for people in the world because Cincinnati is a huge theater town, it's a huge arts town,
Mhm.
and you were born and raised?
Right, in Cincinnati. I still spend my summers there. My children, well, one lives in Cincinnati, three are in Columbus. But I was fortunate enough to go to a Catholic elementary school where did lots of field trips, and we went to the Cincinnati Art Museum at least once a year. Now, this started in grade one, and I love the museum. It's a beautiful structure. It is full of just gorgeous work. They have the most fabulous traveling exhibits.
Yeah.
I guess that's rotating
Right.
traveling exhibits,
Yep.
and so I was used to doing that. I also went to the symphony. They took us on field trips to the Cincinnati Symphony, and so I sort of was raised with that for many many years. Then, um, as I got older, I started going to the other museums, and they just opened. Not I'm not sure you say just. The Contemporary Art Center, of which I'm a member in Cincinnati, the structure is unbelievable. It was designed, the architect was a woman. And so, there's just a plethora of activities. And you mentioned theater, the Playhouse in the Park has been there like forever.
Yeah.
The symphony has been there. And so I loved art at that time. Plus, when we took art classes in elementary school, we had little, not cards, they weren't quite 5 by 7, and they had a painting on it. And then they had a lot about the artist, and we had to memorize that. So I knew a
Those
lot about.
nuns were just forcing you to enjoy art. You're gonna
You
like this whether you like it or not.
That's right. You're gonna say, and then when I went to college, I went to a liberal arts college. We had to take art history, which I love, and that's still. I am not an artist, but I love
That was
art
my next
history.
question.
I like
How did you
the
know?
I like the background information, and
Yeah.
there are some museums and some people that say, well, when you docent show people around, they don't want to know all that background, but I enjoy knowing that. And
Yeah.
so when I docent, I put a little bit of that smattering in, just because I think knowing the context of how this person thought, how they painted, how they got to where that painting is or
Right.
sculpture that you're looking at came about.
And the era and what was happening during
Mhm.
that time. I mean,
Oh,
I guess one of the best things that I ever saw at the Dali,
mhm,
and I'm saying it right, so for everyone out there that says Salvador Dali, I said it wrong too. It's
mhm,
Dali.
mhm,
Um, they did a traveling thing of Andy Warhol works.
mm,
And it wasn't just his paintings. They had TVs of news during the time that he was creating,
mhm.
and then they showed video of him painting, and he's smoking cigarettes and drinking and listening to music. I mean, they all this, it was a lot of background stuff, so it kind of helps you understand where this person came from.
The historical context, I think, is important, and I like that part of it too.
Yeah.
And then, and so, I just got interested in the arts. When I came to Sarasota, I've been here since '89. My first trip here was 1968. I mean, there was not a lot going on here
I
in
know.
1968,
I
but thank
know.
heavens for Ringling. He opened his museum 1930, hired Chick Austin, who just brought everything just up to a head. I mean, he was out there. He was personable. He was spontaneous, and so that's part of where we are right now. I mean, that's what made Sarasota what it is. And these colony artists, people don't know about them. They know, maybe they might have heard of Sid Solomon. They may have heard of Ben Stahl. But when you come to the gallery and you realize these are the people who brought Sarasota to the forefront of art, and this was in the 30s and 70s, 30s and to the 70s. And then the Highwaymen, a lot of people don't know about them, and they have a very interesting story. And we've had them in our gallery. We had one of the Highwaymen. There's not many. I think there's four living, but one of the sons was
Wow.
painting, and his son was there painting,
Oh,
even though he
wow.
didn't want to. He was 21 and he wanted to be able to buy a car to go visit his girlfriend. So he was painting and selling them too.
Making the
So,
money. Yeah.
it's generational and it's wonderful.
You gotta appreciate the fact that people care, and
Mhm,
that people, that they're being consistent, and that they're sharing their values and their art with
mhm.
the kids. I mean, that's, unless you're preparing for the future, you're doing something wrong. So arts, how can people become active with arts advocates? Because you obviously have a group of people that all seem to care. Are you welcoming of new people that want to care about the arts?
Absolutely. We had a talk last week at our luncheon at the yacht club, and it was one of the conservators of conservation conservator of artwork, and she went through a piece of work that it took her 3 years and her staff to get the varnish off, to do the infilling. I mean, it was just wonderful. And at the end, when I got there, there was a gentleman that had registered that I didn't recognize the name. So I introduced myself, and he said, well, his wife works for the International Association, something of architecture in Chicago, and he's a retired banker. So I put him in touch with Mark Ormond, and you know Mark. Mark's our curator at Arts Advocates. And afterwards, he came up and he said, "Well, you guys convinced me. I'm going to join." And so we are membership. We do get, 2 or 3 at our luncheons and at the gallery. And also, we're always looking for volunteers. We need volunteers to host at the luncheons. We need volunteers to be at the gallery from 2 to 4 on Saturdays. There's always ways that you can volunteer: board member, committee chair, committee member. And yes, we love to meet new people and have them join us.
You need that new energy, right?
Absolutely.
Because the history is one thing, but the future is kind of important too, right?
Yes, it will be here before we know it, and we better plan for it.
I know. You're amazing, Carol. And literally hearing more about arts advocates and the work that you do, what a wonderful way of helping our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with our area. We've listed about 10 different organizations. We've listed about 10 different places that they can visit. And all of it ends up supporting and helping our area artists and that history, that momentum that we have to keep our cultural coast, because now basically what you guys started, then Visit Sarasota came around and said, we're the cultural coast. And I love that branding, that we can be, that we brand ourselves. And the festival, we were really supportive of that act as well, that
Yes,
we
and
are here.
congratulations on pulling that off the first year,
Oh,
Jeffrey.
Jiminy Christmas. What a
I know,
nightmare.
I know. Someday we'll have an off the cuff discussion of that.
It doesn't need to be off the cuff. That was crazy. And we are so blessed to be in the area that we are and to have the people around us. And we love our area visitors. I've never complained about traffic once, and I refuse to ever complain about snowbirds because we need you. We need you to come visit us. And we have lots for you to see. So, Carol, thank you so much for being our guest on our
Well, thank you
podcast.
for inviting me. It's always a pleasure, Jeffrey. We go back a long way, and we see each other occasionally, not nearly enough, but you know where I live and I know where you live. And so whenever we can get together, it's always wonderful.
And I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being with us. And I hope you have a great rest of the season. And I can't wait to see you at our next event.
And we will. And thank you so much, Jeffrey. You too.
You got it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Jeffery Kin as a part of Visit Sarasota's Behind the Masterpiece. We love listening to our arts practitioners, and we want you to listen as well. So make sure you join us at sarasotapodcast.com, and we'll see you at the next interview.